Hello, I am here to share a presentation on a Jewish educational model, which aims to build a thirst for knowledge and a future for generations to come. Now, before getting into this presentation, it's important to note that when I mention Jewish education, I'm specifically talking about Jewish education for young children, as Jewish education primarily centers around the young so that they can become learners for the rest of their lives. So, without further ado, let us begin. Now, the real problem with Jewish education currently is that there's a lacking accessibility, inclusivity, and adaptability. Now, with accessibility, it can often be too pricey, isn't known about, or isn't open to the various amount of people that need it. For inclusivity, typically Jewish education isn't really tailored per each student's needs and can be outdated and restrictive. One example of this is if a student or a child has a learning disability or any disability in general, it can be really hard to get the Jewish education that they need and that will work best for them because of this lacking inclusivity. Typically, Jewish education can move at a slower rate than society as it's rooted in many old traditions, so it doesn't keep up with new developments and can't keep on being updated and bring the old into the era with the new. So world validation for this shows that 99% of Jews ages 25 and older around the world have some primary education, and there are 13.4 years of schooling on average per each Jew. Now, while these numbers are pretty impressive, especially because they center around Jewish peoples whose education has been steeped within our culture again and again, these numbers don't account for Jewish education, as there's a really big difference between education for Jews and Jewish education. Some of these differences involve knowledge of classical Jewish sources and rituals, which can also be in reading the Torah and other texts, being able to read or speak Hebrew, the reinforcement of these ideas at home, and experiences that continue past primary education. Now, when it says experiences that continue past, it's talking about letting values, Jewish values, continue to center around one's life and to be open to learning more and more. And this is really important because it further emphasizes the need for positive reinforcement with Jewish education early on, so that if one needs to, one can come back to it later in their lives. So next, the solution for this is an education model which puts students' interests and learning at the forefront in a comprehensive manner. This means that there would be less jam-packed sessions in the classroom educational environment, which includes less students being crammed in one room and less topics being shuffled in again and again. It also means individual attention, as it would be tailored to each student's needs. So it would adapt to what each student would need based upon their learning type, maybe what helps them learn best, what they find most fun or interesting, and also engaging. The whole point of this is that children have fun. They can learn things one piece at a time early on, and so the rest of their lives they'll be open to learning these things because they enjoyed them so much early on. Next, there's only 7.6 million Jewish people in the United States as of 2020, and of those, only 1.6 million are children as of 2020. Now, these numbers initially look pretty big. However, compared to the rest of the population in the United States, they are sadly very small. And additionally, there's only 861 day schools for Jewish children as of 2014. Now, the reason why this is problematic is because day schools don't work for all families. And so here we're seeing that there's a discrepancy because not all children can get access to schools or the education that they need in order to be connected to their idea of Judaism, the idea of their identity, which also accounts for the past, the present, and the future. So to solve this discrepancy, the idea is that there'd be a Sunday school which would be covering values in education, community building, identity, and fostering a love for learning instead of purely content, a place that children look forward to going. Something else really important to note is that within this Sunday school, which would be covering only a few concepts at a time, it would be fed to children in bite-sized pieces. When serving a meal to little kids, you do not give them the entire thing. You don't give them an entire apple if their teeth are still coming in. You would chop up that apple into little pieces and then give it to them, because you need to create bite-sized pieces so that they can digest everything. That's the same thing that the Sunday school is trying to get down, is because at least one idea will stick within a child's mind and be something that they can use as a beacon for the rest of their lives. Whereas the holiday camps, which would ideally be partnered with these Sunday schools, would be able to tackle more content heavy areas, such as learning Hebrew, maybe even analyzing and digesting the texts that would be mentioned within the Sunday school, expanding the knowledge of prophets, history, and one's connection to Israel. So it would kind of be split over more complicated topics and more necessary topics, so that children can get a piece of both without feeling like it's too rushed or as though it won't fit to the style that they need best to learn. And again, as mentioned in this last point, that enrollment in one will mean access to the other for free. And they'd also ideally work together to share resources. So the Sunday school and holiday camp would work in conjunction with one another. Furthermore, we look at the idea, we can see that there's a important curriculum that also needs to be placed, an important emphasis is placed upon. So the first point is that it has to be pluralistic. There's not only one way to be Jewish. There are so many Jewish people around the world who celebrate in multiple different ways. Now, the first three here, Reform, Orthodox, and Conservative, are different religious sects of Judaism, while Ashkenazi, Sephardic, and Mizri are three different cultural differences of Judaism that hail from different areas around the world. So ideally, a Jewish child would be able to learn that it's okay to know all of these differences. It's okay to maybe believe in one but not believe in the other. It's okay to question them, because that's the whole point about education. It's that if you can't question, if you can't go through discourse, then you might not find the answers you need to believe in it. And that's something that really needs to be emphasized by giving all of the information out, as opposed to just tiny amounts that show one side or one bias. Next, it would be project-based, because much evidence has shown how tests and memorization do not contribute to learning. Prioritizing hands-on experience and having fun is what really allows children to learn, being able to apply the skills that they learn. This is also something that's been super important in Jewish education throughout, is being able to actually see how one's actions have an impact, how one connects to something, as opposed to just memorizing it and spitting it back on a piece of paper. And as I've already mentioned, it would be kind of slow paced so that a lot of different ideas could be introduced, and also so that children don't feel overwhelmed. And the most important point about this curriculum is that it needs to be reinforced at home. If a child hears something from school and sees their parents do the opposite of it, or their parents not uphold it at all, then that idea isn't going to become ingrained in them. That idea is going to actually go the opposite way. They're going to think it's unimportant when it might be important. Of course, this isn't to say that parents are wrong. It's just to say that there needs to be communication between parents and educators about what important things need to be reinforced at home if parents are really interested in getting their child a solid Jewish education that will allow them to learn for the rest of their lives and be open to learning for it. So an example of this that we can use is the example of tzedakah. Now, tzedakah is considered to be super important for not just children, but for someone's entire life. It represents human need and meeting human need, because it's about charity. It's about giving back to the community through money, which is earned through hard work. So it's essentially saying that you're giving up a piece of yourself to other people and to your community. Now, the reason why this is important is because it can be super powerful for one to learn as a young child, but that's not all. It can also be a good way to actually apply a skill. So for this project, it mentions how there's one big tzedakah box that can then be created, and children can either bring in coins every day after it's created, or bring in paper coins if they can't afford such, or really just make something on their own to put in this tzedakah box, and then it would be able to be donated to a cause that they have all chosen together, to show how it actually helps people. So you're making a project, you're learning about why something's important, and then you're applying it afterwards. And when learning about it, there'd be multiple different ways. So there'd be writing about it, maybe reading books, singing songs, and again, doing a project. So you'd hit a lot of different learning types, because you're not only sticking to one idea, but you're allowing children's minds to be creative and learn about it. So this would ideally be something that would be seen within this program. Of course, this doesn't have to be exactly replicated, but it can be something that can be used to further such values. For the market strategy, there would initially be partnering for every holidays with temples. So, for example, if there was a Passover celebration, then a temple would be open to have like a potluck Seder that Jewish children and communities could come to if they didn't have any other place to go for these holidays. So, it would also spread the word about this program and this model through word of mouth and community outreach, because be rabbis, educators, and also parents and students who are talking about how such a model has made partnering available, and they'll actually involve people who are interested. So it hits right in the community where people need it the most, which is Jewish children. And of course, it'd also be like a website where a lot of information will be posted and shared, and online opportunities in case in-person classes are not available to be reached, because ideally it would be completely in person, as that is one of the best ways to learn, and online can be particularly hard, especially for young children. Looking at the competition, day schools can typically be expensive, and because they're so expensive, they're less accessible. Whereas Sunday schools, which are less accessible because of their weekend continuous hours, are cheaper. And so to balance this out, we can go to holiday camps, which tend to be more expensive, but are pretty accessible because it allows parents to work while their children are being taken care of and given constant access to learning. Then online programs are both cheaper and accessible, but don't offer the most variety or the best education that one can truly get. And so the advantages of this program over any others is that it's innovative. It's an ever-evolving model that adapts with society. It's not going to stay in one place forever and never be able to adapt. That goes against the entire point of the model, because it wants to be adaptable. It wants to be able to see to reflect the changes that are being created in society. Next, it has to be enjoyable. It creates an excitable learning experience that gets parents, educators, and students all really excited to learn and willing to devote themselves to such learning. It's inexpensive. The whole point about this is accessibility. So I want to make it as cheap as possible, give provisions for those who cannot afford it, and also have fundraising for those who can more than afford it. It's easy to access, open for all those enrolled in person and online. And additionally, this goes hand in hand with simple to understand. It's nothing confusing or over the top. It helps parents understand what they're getting into, and it also helps students understand that their materials in, as mentioned, bite-sized pieces that aren't overwhelming or aren't hard to comprehend. And so even if they only pick up on a little bit of the material at a time, it'll still be more than nothing. It'll be enough to keep their interest within the realm of education, which is also why it can be comprehensive, because it takes into account what is best for parents and children. Because in the society nowadays, parents can often be very busy, and so they have to be at the forefront right below children, because of course children are the priority. Currently, our team is just me. I'm a student and traveler, and I developed such a presented idea. I go to school at Eagle Rock High School and attend programs for Jews, where I often am able to learn more about Judaism and can explore it with my own identity. And it's something that's so incredible that I think that it's important for young children to also be able to experience such programs in a comprehensive way at their age. And some things that some professionals have said about Jewish education in general is that there should be more time for it. And that's really important, because that is one thing that this model aims to solve. The fact that there isn't enough time. Because by making a child a learner for the rest of their lives, they will have the rest of their lives to learn such important skills. And like another professional mentions, or another educator, is that the internet can be hard to condense everything on the internet about education into something simple for a child to understand. That is exactly what this model attempts to do with its online programs, is to make it understandable, make it easy, make it comprehensible. And then again, mentions how Jewish education is not a race, not one size fits all in Judaism, which is why it needs to be inclusive. It needs to make sure that there's enough time to reach everyone, because they need it, so that we can celebrate people who have survived and persevered, as the last educator has mentioned. Lastly, the sources in this template were inspired by Pitch Deck by Airbnb through the Vismate platform, and all images and content are recreated and used through public license. Thank you.